some of the bigger innovations that are coming down the pipeline in farming that are going to make a big difference? Are you really excited about automation or artificial intelligence or vertical farming or?
Yeah, automation, artificial intelligence, definitely. I like the fact where the weed control, where they identify the weeds and they take that
Yep.
weed out rather than
Yep.
spraying everything and killing the good bugs and the bad ones. The big thing that could be a market mover and game changer is gene editing, gene genetic engineering.
CRISPR.
Because you could come up, or we should come up with how to utilize the, let's say, the western part of the Saskatchewan, the whole of southern Alberta, with the crops that are a lot more drought tolerant. Those genes are available. There's no reason we can't do that.
I often wonder too if 300 ppm of CO2 is inferior to 400 ppm of CO2 in a greenhouse, and that's what we've seen as a trend. Isn't more carbon dioxide making a greener planet, which is making more food production, which is reducing our inputs, which is environmental? I just sometimes wonder, is carbon really the issue, or I guess we just put our hands up and get paid for it because people's emotions are attached to it, and hey, we'll take your money.
Well, during the healthiest parts of the planet, like when it was all green, they had the highest carbon footprint.
Right.
But so I don't think you'll be able to change that. I think there's so much money. When I talk to these guys in New York, they got billions set aside for carbon. They just don't know where to put it, how to put it to work. We as an industry are not ready for it yet. But they got money set aside for it that's earmarked for environmental carbon credit portion. And countries out east, from what I understand, they're already buying carbon credits to offset their carbon footprint.
Well, the exciting thing is not only did we win the lottery in where we live, but I think the industry that we're in can solve so many of these problems, Robert. And I don't know if you're aware, but there's talk of say, basalt rock dust. If you applied it to half the acres on planet Earth in such a quantity that it would solve this CO2 problem and greenhouse gases. And yet I wonder, isn't it insanity to spread basalt rock dust, get paid for it by people worried about the environment to reduce CO2, which in turn reduces productivity of the crops that we grow? I mean, you just wonder if
There'll
we're
be
going
a
in circles.
lot of mistakes made as we go forward. Because you're going to have unintended consequences. You'll do a lot of damage where you think you're doing good in the initial stage. So it'll be a trial and error.
I find one of the scariest prospects is people that are generally good individuals, good people, and they have the best of intentions. But obviously, if they're misguided, they can do the most damage because, of course, they think they're doing
Well, again, that's
good.
unintended consequences. Something that they didn't think would happen happens, and it goes hand in hand with what they were trying to achieve is one component, and they may solve it 50%, but the other 50% is damage, or sometimes quite a bit different ratios.
Well, one thing that I'm probably most fascinated and curious about yourself, Robert, is how you do your research. And I imagine you as something of a, when you're not in the field, of course, something of a Warren Buffett type where you're sitting around, you're reading newspapers, you're reading articles, you're looking at white papers, you're, extrapolating things. What does your day look like? What does it take to do the kind of research you're doing to bet on big moves like you've been very right?
I'd say the biggest thing in business that most people don't even consider, human nature. Because we tend to make the same mistakes that, let's say, the Romans made. You can go right back to Roman times, and it'll be the human nature that governs our whole perception of everything and actions and everything else. And that's where, like you look at fiat currencies. Like, let's say U.S. now is at the peak. Usually fiat currencies have a lifespan of about 100 years. And since the Second World War, since U.S. currency became the reserve currency. Yeah, they run their course now. So
How much Bitcoin do you have, Robert?
I don't have any. I don't believe in it.
You don't believe in it?
Farmland and gold, yes.
How
But
much gold do you have buried in the back 40?
again, the gold correlates closely to farmland.
Yeah.
It'll go up during inflationary times, even during recessions. The only thing is gold doesn't pay any rental income. You
Right.
carry it for what it's worth or whatever it is. But of course, with farmland, you have rental income.
I always
There's
see
nothing that
farmland
beats
as
farmland actually in agriculture. Agriculture will be the industry that'll benefit the most. Not that it won't be set back a little. Not like nothing is from point A to point B in a straight up like angle. It's all zigzag, sawtooth all the way up.
right.
But the point is that agriculture is going from point A to point B, up, bottom left, upper right.
You make a good point about farmland versus gold. I always see it as, of course we're producing food and energy and other products for the world, but at the same time, aren't we just cash flowing some of the best real estate on planet Earth? If you're McDonald's and you can make hamburgers to the tune of 200 stores on Manhattan Island on some of the best corner lots in the world in cities all over the world, I mean, they're cash flowing real estate. I mean, they're selling burgers, but they're cash flowing real estate.
Well, farmland doesn't matter, like especially with the growing population. Growing population is one thing. Everybody says, well, people have to eat. Yes, they always had to eat, but there was times where agriculture products were very cheap and so on because other countries subsidized their producers and so on, and you couldn't sell into those markets. The thing now is you have most of those countries being so much in so much debt that they can't subsidize much as they used to. And the other
Right.
thing is climate change is playing in favor of, the price of products, agriculture products, always highest when some other countries have their worst years, droughts or whatever.
Yeah.
So, but now that's becoming, they're becoming closer on a decade basis or whatever basis you want, closer together and far stronger. So let's say, like when I used to design warehouse office buildings, you have to your let's say roof drainage and your main drainage on the parking lots and the rest had to be designed for 1 in 100 year storm. Trouble is, those 1 in 100 year storms now are becoming every 20 years instead of every 100. So that's what I mean by things being condensed and coming together much closer, and therefore wreaking havoc on agriculture production. The best part was up to this point anyway, is we had the largest middle class the world has ever seen.
Right.
Okay, and what does that middle class want? They want your and my lifestyle. They want
Put on a few pounds. It's prosperity gut, you call it. Yeah. Oh, that's funny. Oh man. Well, I'm spent. I've been thinking about all the things that you said, and it's a lot to digest. But it's very interesting, and I was going to ask you, have you been wrong about anything major that counted?
Well, I think everybody's been wrong. It's just to what degree and how can you cover it up?
Have you been really wrong, and have you made those mistakes? And the big movements, it seems like you've caught them though. Or was there a
The
thing that
big
you
ones I
thought?
caught. The little small ones, yeah, I made some. And it's always where you try to save money, become the most efficient, and that saving money sometimes costs you money. You
Yeah.
know, like I'm referring to buildings and so on that I used to do and so on. Uh, but overall, would I do things differently? No, no. I think
Where do you see your company your companies in 3 to 5 to 10 years? What are you gunning for now?
just be the most efficient you can be. Work with the tenant, see what they need. See, we don't just go there and dictate to the tenant or just on. We listen. What are your suggestions? You farm that land, that section of land that you can tell me where. What would you do? The question I always pose to my tenant: if you were this was your land, if you were paying for it, what would you do to improve it?
Hmm.
And invariably, 90% of the time we do it exactly the same way with their suggestions.
Ask the check writer. I think that's very wise. You talked about legacy to your children. Land is something that you can pass down. You think about that a lot. Is that important to you? What do you think your legacy will
Well,
be?
this business actually, if you boil it down, if I stop buying land, is basically just a property management business. That's exactly the same. My whole family was involved in the Sunex properties, the property, warehouse, office, industrial buildings. But we did everything from land acquisitions to building design, building construction, and ultimately the leasing and rent collection, property management, so on. So it's the same thing. So
Yeah.
anybody can step into it, any one of them. They're working in different fields right now, but one is a mortgage broker, structured financing, and so on. So that falls in place for financing for that. My daughter Sherry, she does uh, alternative alternative infrastructure and so on for CMHC and so on, investing. Again, same thing. And she was involved. They were all involved in SunX in some field or other. So, and this is no different. This is very minor changes, but
Yeah.
they
So
can
it's a
all do it.
company.
Yeah.
It's a company. But what about? Are you concerned with your legacy, or what would you like your legacy to be?
Well, I'd like him to continue because I think it's the best business to be in. Like right now, would I go back to my industrial field? No. Could you make money at it like once all this dust settles? Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
But I like this better, like because it's, I think, all the criticism and everything aside, if they knew the true story, they wouldn't criticize, or they have very minor criticisms.
Yeah.
But that's the only kind of aspect that I have a little problem with because I know the whole story. They don't. They don't know the facts. And they just criticize looking from outside in without knowing the facts. If they knew the facts, there'd be very minimal criticism. And
What
how
would you
many,
say? Yeah. Go ahead. Go
and
ahead.
how many like of these producers are we benefiting? A whole lot because they don't have to invest their capital. Farming is a very capital intensive business, very similar to again commercial real estate. The land, the equipment, the inputs, and everything else. So any tenant, like they farms 5,000 acres, rents another five from us. Uh, he can rent that 5,000 acres from us until he's ready. Put his cash aside. When he's ready to buy, he can let us go buy the 5,000. But nobody really puts it in perspective like that.
Yeah.
It's a kind of stepping stone that you could use, and rent is far cheaper than you'd be paying. Like if you pay 4,000 an acre per cultivated acre now, uh, you'd be paying at 7%, 4,700, $280 rent, right? If it was at 7%, that you'd have to pay the bank.
Well, I'd
And
be really curious,
my rent's
you know.
only at 200, at 110, let's say. So less than half.
Yeah. I'd be really curious for someone listening to this, their perception of you before and after. And I think it's good that you do share your story online. And also, you're advocating for agriculture in some of these major media organizations because of your position of Canada's largest landowner. You feel some responsibility to share that story?
Well, I feel a responsibility to educate the public about agriculture. Everybody, when I go out east and I talk to different people, even bankers, oh yeah, I have a grandfather I used to go to, to his farm and everything. So they're thinking in terms of 50 year ago or whatever, agriculture practices. They have no clue of what's happening today. So I'm trying to educate them, try to educate the public a little bit about unintended consequences of, let's say, federal government's reduction in carbon footprint, or they want to call it that, but it was actually in fertilizer cut. Uh, yeah, yeah, it's also to educate the lenders because again, a lot of them, uh, some of them are good right now, but don't forget the big decisions come from out east, and you have to educate those guys. And I can meet with heads of the banks and explain to them, especially the difference between, let's say, commercial real estate, where they're all in that up to their eyebrows, as to how agriculture compares and how much better it is. How much, like, let's say, when there's vacancy, you don't have to take on all the common area costs that could be $20 a square foot. Let's say on land, there's hardly anything. It's only taxes. Let's say when they ask me, well, what's your TIs? Tenant improvements, in other words, because
Mm.
every landlord in commercial real estate participates, especially in a kind of bad market or lower end market. They participate in tenant improvements. So I have yet, when a tenant vacates, for another one to move in and say, oh, this is perfect for me. They always want this wall moved. I want this office bigger. I want this corridor that way. I need a washroom there. In other words, it's always improvements, and that happens every 5-10 years whenever somebody outgrows the premises or whatever. So there's always TIs. So I can tell them there is no TIs. Once I do my improvements, land improvements, bury the rocks, remove the fences, remove the odd bluff and this and that. That stays, and that's a plus throughout the life of that land. As a matter of fact, becomes better because as you farm it, like anything you've improved, takes 2 years, 3 years, optimal production yield. So it becomes better as time goes instead of becoming worse because like carpets and so on will have to be replaced in a commercial and so on. So there's no TIs. But they all think in terms of that. And what's your free rent-free period? Like in industrial, commercial, you give them a rent-free period, 2, 3 months, sometimes half a year. When it's a real bad market. But I can talk to them about all that because I know both sides.
I think the lending aspect is really important that you touched on because I had a older fellow from Saskatchewan, God bless him, Michael Muscovy from southeastern Saskatchewan on the show, and he talked about a time when Royal Bank wasn't lending to farmers. They didn't want to take on the farmland. And you're talking about a time when we might go back there, not necessarily because of the nature of farmland, but because there's a fundamental systemic issue in the banking system in this coming recession/depression.
Well, again, the better they understand it, uh, especially the good points, and there's so many, as opposed to the rest of their investment. They have to invest someplace. Them sitting on your deposit doesn't do anything for them. They have to put the money to work to make the spread. So what they're going to be looking, even when they go into this recession/depression, and they're going to take a haircut on a lot of buildings. They're going to look at where can we put the money with the least amount of risk. And I'm telling them that's agriculture, and the whole agriculture, even the value-added chain, is their best choice with the least amount of risk, and that's what they're going to be looking for. Decision makers have to know that. You talking to your local banker in Regina or in some small town or something, doesn't cut it. Like he's only a part of it. He can't explain it to the other guys,
Right.
to the high up in Toronto that make that decisions. Because once they get their marching orders, like once the economy turns sour and they say we don't want to lend in that space, that's it. They're not going to be, there's no money available. And without that, the whole industry takes a haircut and starts going backwards.
I feel like there's going to be a lot of things that I'm going to want to ask you that as I listen back to this and I catch more details. But I think we've covered a lot of ground for today. I guess my last question, unless something else comes up, but my last question for you, Robert, would be, what is it that you would offer to your fellow, farming industry folks as advice with what's, you're talking about big changes coming and big things happening here very shortly. What do you advise?
Like I don't, when I meet with my tenants, my whole background's, of course, working with finance, mortgage lenders, and everybody else. And let go back almost 20 years. Floating rates have been the ones to go with because the interest rates were like plateau, and then they kept on coming down. They ended up at around 3. So the last 3 years, I've been advocating and telling them to lock in 5 minimum, 10 preferably, and 15 if possible. A lot of them have done that. I talked to a competitor actually, and we went for lunch, and I told them what I believe. That was 2 years ago, to lock in. They didn't lock in. They used floating because it was only 2% or 2.25% instead of the 3 and some. So they felt it was better off. They had to sell the land because they couldn't keep up with that 7% now, today's rate. But
Reverse
anyway,
psychology.
thank you, Paul, from my tenants saying, well, I locked in. It doesn't matter now what their interest rates do. Like everybody thinks in terms of, oh, these interest rates, they're killing everybody. No, they're killing only the portion of the market where they have to lock in or use that interest rate and pay on that. But the guys that locked in 15 years, Christ, they're sitting pretty at 3.25% for 15 years. 3.5 or whatever they locked in. And I know some of them locked in 10, 15-year money.
Lock it in and wait for the big opportunities, hey?
Yes, yeah, because right now they're making the difference. They're still making the same amount as the through yields and everything that the guy that's paying 7%, except they're keeping the 4% to themselves. So they'll have the cash, no question. They're building cash reserves. So
Good
they'll
advice.
be the ones that are able to buy land going down the road and everything else because they're constantly building their cash position because of the amount they're saving in the long run.
Right. Right. Fascinating
So,
stuff. What else? Is there anything else you'd like to share, Robert? Anything else on your mind that we didn't touch on? I think we covered every topic on planet Earth.
well, that complicated part is going to be for the rest of the world now to undo the global economy and become more local. And that is a very complicated process that'll take dozens of years. Like we'll solve it little bit by little bit within, and so on, but it's come to an end. The process is going to take a long time and a lot of money. Where we're going to get that money, I don't know, because the governments throughout the world are all indebted up to their eyebrows uh, and have very little wiggle room.
Yeah.
So I don't know how we're going to be able to finance all that.
Yeah.
And my guess is capital, it may come down, mortgages and everything else, one more shot. And then after that, inflation's going to kick into really high gear. And you could potentially see 10, 20% inflation down the road. Once all that, because of the value chain and everything else that's been so disrupted because of the global trade gone by wayside.
I'm not a globalist, but are we going to look back on the good old days when we used to trade globally in a much different way?
Yes, we will, because like I said, we were getting a free ride from China producing cheap goods. Look in your house, look anywhere in your office, anywhere you want. Most of the stuff's made in China. And now that's all shut off. We've been importing uh, uh, low inflation from those countries. But now it's all going to reverse. It's all going to have to change. And everything that I see going forward is more expensive, no matter which route we take.
Will there
And
be opportunities for us in some of those countries like Russia and China? Well, Russia, I mean, obviously it's complicated, but will there be opportunities in the future? Like, what's going to happen to these countries with these demographic issues and global supply issues and implosion of real estate and different
well,
things like
everybody's
that?
in the same boat. Everybody has to come to a different solution, a solution that's different than what we've done in the past. Because what we've done in the past, like look at your auto industry. What you got? What 20, 30 different countries supplying parts to make one car.
Yeah.
Now none of that exists, or a lot of it won't exist. You may still have 10, but where's the other 10? So we're still cruising on all this inventory and all the money supply that's been printed and everything, and gone to the public and so on. We have not come to grips yet with reality.
Yeah, I just think about, my kids and I have a 24-year-old son, a 21-year-old daughter, and I also have a 7-year-old daughter. And I just think about the world that they're going into. And I'm an ultimate optimist, Robert. I think there's going to be a lot of really good things, but on the other hand, it's kind of scary. And when they go to own a vehicle, when they go to own a home, when they go to travel, when they go to do anything on planet Earth, I just wonder how limited will their options be, and will we ever see that kind of wealth that my parents, and I guess I'm on the tail end of it, will have had, and will they have that? What kind of future will they have?
Well, definitely more expensive, inflation wise, and so on, no question. Uh, Opportunities in fields that you not even dream of, can't dream of right now,
Yeah.
like artificial intelligence and everything else, and even in like a lot of my grandchildren are pushing them towards, let's say, work in the carbon credit uh, or identifying them. There's nobody there right now that understands it. It's a whole industry that's going to require hundreds of thousands, of millions of people, uh, because the money's being set aside for it.
Hmm.
Except these guys don't know how to implement it, where to put it, and there's no vehicles yet. Uh, and there'll be all kinds of different opportunities, not the ones that we knew in the past, new ones, but
Yep.
opportunities by far
Yep.
for innovative, out of the box thinkers.
Well, that's a positive note to leave things on. And, ultimately, I am still optimistic. I think there's going to be lots of opportunities and these things will come and go. But it's something to consider for everybody. And I think we're all seeing it no matter who you are. You just walk around grocery stores. I heard an old couple come out of the grocery store yesterday, just kind of, whew, everything is so expensive. And, we don't have as much money as we used to. Our dollar isn't worth what it was.
Okay, well, the problem with all that is governments are going to get involved. They're going to put pricing ceilings in or price controls. Uh, that has never worked.
Yeah.
It's been tried lots, never worked. And they're going to try it again. And then what's that going to do? They're just going to empty the shelves because guys won't carry what they're being forced to sell at a loss.
That I don't understand. I haven't researched it, but how the government could go into an incredibly competitive business, as I understand the grocery business, to go in there and tell them, hey, you guys are the bad guys, and you got to get grocery prices down. Meanwhile, it's a lot of inflationary policies and a whole 30 to 50 factors you're talking about that make the difference. But it's pretty easy to make the grocers into bad guys, isn't it? But aren't they just business people that are like, they're just, it's a purely competitive market, isn't it?
Well, it's a very competitive market if you look at their margins.
Yeah.
But I don't think, like I said, it can't work. Never worked before, well, and it's tried lots of times. But there's a lot of things that governments will do. Government is the guilty party. Okay, they can blame Powell, the Fed, and the rest all they want. It's the governments that ran those deficits, and they're the ones that they're paying. What are they paying in the interest alone right now because
Yeah.
of the 7%? Don't forget they're in the same boat. They're being penalized immediately because a lot of their debt is pegged to current rates.
Yeah.
There may be a time where, and this I don't want to go into this too much because it's a real problem. If vigilantes say enough is enough, and the bond auction fails, federal bond auction in like U.S. Treasury bills, they don't buy the Treasury bills, they could force the interest rate up, boom, like that to 10-20% like nothing.
Isn't it events, though, that reshape the world such that we come up with something better? We're forced to, because we've just been kicking the same old shitty can down the road. Isn't that the truth?
The
Just how
problem
much
remains, how
pain?
do you get rid of that deficit?
Yeah.
The only way they can get rid of the deficit is through, number one, and that's what they like, inflation. That's why true inflation, if you go back to the 70s, 80s way of calculating inflation, I've done it a couple weeks ago, is around 15, 20%.
That's it. Not only that, but if you're paying for anything like a house or a car or groceries on planet Earth, it's double. It's twice as like, your buying
Yeah, but
power is
that's
half.
where they remove the housing. You know how they calculate in US, how they calculate the housing? Not the cost of the house or anything else or how much the house has risen. They calculate it by how much would that house rent for. Now I've been in construction my whole life. I'm 12 years old, and I couldn't guess it. Now, how could an average person in living in a house, working any job they like, guess what that house would be worth on today's market as far as rent is concerned? And they take that rent as part of the housing cost.
Yeah, I
And
don't
then
know.
they take out the gas because it's volatile. They take out food, volatile.
I
So
know.
what's left? You
What are
and
they
me don't
counting?
need to drive anywhere. We don't need to eat. We don't
Yeah,
need a house.
heat our
What the
homes.
heck? And then
Yeah.
that's how come and then it's also massaged a little afterwards, but that's a different game. But take the government's own data, 1980s data, how they calculated it, and plug in the numbers today, and you'll see 15% to 20% come out.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, the politics. It's just a
Yeah,
disaster.
but the
It's
problem is, like for future generations, is the debt because they have no income from that other than they don't create any value of anything. All they do is dip into your pocket and mine. That's all. That's all they got. So people that say, well, the government will provide for it. Well, who the heck's the government? Look in the mirror and look around you. It's people. That's all they got. So if they're going to change anything or give anything free, they need to dip into your pocket more or cause a bigger deficit. And what's
I agree.
keeping US afloat today is definitely the cleanest dirty shirt syndrome. It's because they still feel it's the safe haven, US dollar and US economy and everything else, because the rest of the world is in such problem, even bigger problems. See, if you go back, there's always been one country that tried this route, printing money, going into these big deficits and everything else. Argentina, Russia, and different countries, the Weimar Republic, and so on. The results always been same. You needed a wheelbarrow of money to buy a loaf of bread.
Yeah.
Okay, what makes this one so different than the whole world's trying it? It's not. It's just how far down the road it's going to go before we have to face the inevitable
Well,
and pay
my
a lot.
grandfather was born on the Volga River region of Russia. His parents were invited in by Catherine the Great, right at the turn of the century there, and he came to Canada in the early 1900s. But he escaped. He escaped the Bolsheviks, and I wonder sometimes if the more pain we're going to experience on that side, if they won't be coming for any of the folks that have acquired wealth in a capitalist fashion, if it won't be a Bolshevik mentality, how else are you going to pay the bills?
Well, that's one thing I fear is uh, public uprisings and
Yep.
unrest and so on. Uh, there'll be a lot
Yeah.
of different factors at work, even water, food, you name it. I think there'll be famines down the road as early as next year. You're going to see
Yeah.
them.
Yeah.
So
You
there'll
can
be a
see it in
lot
the
of,
homeless. You can see, and I don't, it's hard to tell whether it's more sophisticated drugs like meth issues and stuff like that, but you see it in the cities, and people that don't have purpose and they don't have food in their bellies, that creates a dangerous state for
they
mankind.
got
And
nothing to lose. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's scary. So we want people to be fed. We want them to have purpose and work, you know. Um, we want the best for everybody, but it's I see some of the most vulnerable being hurt right now, and that breaks my heart because I think all the do-gooders out there really mean well, but it is hurting a cross section of people that I hope they feel hope too, but it's it's scary if you don't see any way out and you see your world shrinking. I worry for those folks. I worry for my kids. So I guess you got to stay on the side of making the right choices, doing enough research like you've done, making the profitable choices throughout life that aid in one's survival. Because it's still that survival.
Well, at least we're in the right business because I don't think you could pick a better business than agriculture to be
Yep,
in and survive all this, no matter what's thrown at you.
I believe so too. We're very fortunate, Robert, and I've been very fortunate to have this conversation with you. It's been amazing. I really appreciate it. And you're very gracious to take your time and educate people and share your story. I know sometimes you take flack for it, but by presenting your story, I think that educates folks. And everything I've ever heard about you on the street, man, people say you're a great guy to partner with in business. I know a number of the folks that you're working with, and they have nothing but good to say. So again, ask the check writers.
Well, that's what I use as a check mark. People that criticize, like I don't mind criticism. If you know the facts, show me where I'm wrong. Well, I'll be all eyes and ears looking at it and
Yeah,
trying to correct it. But
yeah.
if you don't know the facts, if you just coffee shop talk, well, yeah, take it with a grain of salt. And I suppose it comes with the territory.
Well, you've done good. And I hope that this conversation will also help some folks that maybe didn't know you and the way you see the world. I hope that it helps, and really honored that you came on the podcast. I really appreciate you and respect you, and I think you're doing some good work out there. And it's been great talking to you.
Well, nice talking to you too. And let's put this together and get it out to the public. And
Let's let the people know.
yeah,
Good job, Robert. I appreciate it. Thank you.
okay then. Thanks. Have a good day.
You too.